It was supposed to be another unforgettable night in Elvis Presley's legendary career. The king of rock and roll had commanded countless stages, mesmerized millions, and left audiences screaming for more. But on this night, under the blinding lights and roaring cheers, something happened that no one could have scripted. Elvis spotted a young girl in the crowd, pulled her up on stage, and gave her the moment of a lifetime. What she whispered in his ear, seconds later, made the king himself break down in tears right in front of thousands of fans. The arena buzzed with the electricity only Elvis could create. Fans clutched handmade signs. Mothers held their daughters on their shoulders, and the flashbulbs of cameras lit up the space like constellations. Elvis had just launched into Can't Help Falling in Love, his velvet voice filling every corner of the venue. He wore his iconic white jumpsuit, studded with rhinestones that shimmered under the lights. Sweat beaded on his forehead, proof of the energy he poured into every performance. The audience surged forward, eager to be closer, their screens harmonizing with the melody. For Elvis, these concerts were more than music. They were communion. Each song was a thread tying him to the lives of those who adored him. And as he sang, he scanned the crowd. He always did. Not for security, not for distraction, but because he genuinely wanted to feel connected to every face. That's when he noticed her. A girl, maybe 12 years old, holding a bouquet of simple daisies. Unlike the others, she wasn't screaming. She wasn't pushing or jumping. She just stood there quietly, eyes wide, clutching those flowers as though they were her only lifeline. Elvis, gaze locked on hers. Something in her stillness called to him. He smiled mid-song, took a few steps closer to the edge of the stage, and gestured to security. The crowd erupted as the girl was lifted from the sea of fans and brought up to him. Gasps echoed across the arena. Elvis Presley, the king, had chosen her. He took the bouquet gently, then leaned down and asked her name into the microphone. She whispered something back. He nodded, smiled again, and then, without hesitation, he pulled her into a soft embrace. The moment was magical, but no one yet knew the storm of emotions that embrace would unleash. The music slowed. Elvis kept one arm around the girl's shoulders, as if shielding her from the weight of the stadium. He lowered the microphone so the crowd couldn't hear their conversation, leaning closer. She looked up at him with trembling lips and finally spoke. At first, he thought he misheard her, but as she repeated the words, his chest tightened. The dazzling lights blurred in his vision. She had said something about her father, about how he had taken her to see Elvis when she was younger, but he wasn't here anymore. She said Elvis songs were the only way she still felt close to him. Elvis froze. He knew that kind of loss, the ache of absence. His mind shot back to his own mother, Gladys, the woman he loved more than anyone. Losing her had been a wound he never truly recovered from. The girl continued, voice fragile but steady. He told me if I ever met you, I should give you flowers from him. She held the daisies tighter. For the first time in years, Elvis felt his throat tighten beyond control. He wasn't just an entertainer in this moment. He was a bridge between the living and the gone. The crowd noticed his silence. Whispers rippled. Cameras zoomed. And then, the king of rock and roll, in front of thousands, with spotlights glaring, closed his eyes. A single tear escaped. Elvis Presley had one unspoken rule when it came to his concerts. No matter how overwhelming the energy, no matter how exhausting the night, he would never let the audience see him cry. He was the king, after all. His job was to give strength, not show weakness. But as he stood there, arm wrapped around the small girl, daisies trembling between her hands, he realized that rule had already been shattered. The whisper of her father's memory cut through every wall he had built to protect. Himself on stage, Elvis tightened his grip on the microphone, steadying his breath. The band waited for his cue, their instruments held in suspense. The audience leaned forward, thousands of faces frozen in anticipation. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then, in a low, trembling voice, Elvis said, This young lady just reminded me that music isn't just about singing or dancing. It's about people. It's about love. The crowd erupted in applause, but Elvis held up a hand, asking them for quiet. His eyes glistened under the stage lights. She told me her daddy brought her to hear me once. And though he isn't here tonight, he's here in a way. Gasps moved through the crowd. Some fans pressed tissues to their eyes. Others hugged one another, sensing something sacred unfolding before them. Elvis cleared his throat, turned to the girl, and said softly, Honey, this one's for him. The band picked up the opening chords to Love Me Tender, but Elvis didn't sing it as he usually did. His voice carried a weight, a rawness, as though every lyric was stitched with longing. He looked at the girl throughout the song, and more than once his voice cracked, breaking into silence before he gathered himself to continue. Never before had the king faltered mid-performance. And yet, in that imperfection, the concert transformed into something far greater. Fans weren't watching a flawless superstar anymore. They were witnessing a man, vulnerable, singing with every piece of his soul. By the final verse, the girl was crying quietly at his side. Elvis knelt down to her level, still holding the microphone, and together they finished the last line. And I always will. The arena went completely silent for a breathless moment. No cheers, no screams, only stillness, like the entire crowd was afraid to break the spell. Then, suddenly, a wave of applause, deafening and thunderous, rolled across the venue. Elvis stood, eyes shining, and gave the girl a gentle kiss on the forehead. He handed the daisies back to her, as if returning a treasure that belonged to her story, not his. For the first time in his career, Elvis Presley broke his own rule. And far from diminishing him, it made him greater. Because that night, the king reminded the world that even legends cry. The thunderous applause seemed endless, echoing through the walls of the arena. But then something remarkable happened. As Elvis stood with the girl by his side, the cheers gradually softened. One by one, voices hushed, clapping slowed, and an uncanny silence swept over thousands of people. It wasn't the silence of boredom or confusion. It was reverence. Every person in that stadium recognized they had just witnessed something unrepeatable. The usual hysteria of an Elvis concert had transformed into something resembling a church service, sacred, solemn, unspoken. Elvis looked out over the crowd, momentarily overwhelmed. For years, he had been used to screaming fans, fainting women, and the unrelenting demands of fame. But this silence? This silence was louder than any roar. It was the silence of hearts breaking together, of people united by grief and love through a single song. The girl clutched her bouquet tighter, her knuckles white around the stems. She leaned close to Elvis, whispering again. No microphone, no amplification. Only he could hear her words. Later, he would admit to friends backstage that she had said, "You sound just like my daddy did when he sang to me." Those words almost unraveled him again. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, grounding himself in the moment. The band, uncertain of what to do, waited. Elvis raised a hand, giving them a new signal. Slowly, the soft opening chords of Bridge Over Troubled Water filled the space. It wasn't a song he often performed, but on this night, it felt destined. As his deep voice rolled over the crowd, every note carried the weight of shared humanity. Mothers held their children tighter. Couples entwined their fingers. Grown men, who had sworn they'd never cry, wiped tears from their cheeks. The silence wasn't broken. It was filled with the resonance of something bigger than celebrity or spectacle dot, and through it all, the girl stood quietly beside him, as if she were the anchor that kept him steady. When the song ended, Elvis didn't shout his usual thank you. Instead, he whispered into the microphone, voice barely audible, "Remember those you've loved. Keep them close. They never really leave us." A wave of sobs rolled through the audience. Fans who had come for excitement left with something far more valuable, a piece of truth carried by the king's trembling voice. That night, the audience wasn't just entertained, they were changed. Long after the final encore, after the spotlights dimmed and the stage crew began dismantling equipment, whispers of what had happened still echoed through the arena corridors. Fans walked out not buzzing with excitement, but speaking in hushed tones, as though they had been part of something holy. The girl disappeared back into the crowd, holding her bouquet of daisies with tears staining her cheeks. Elvis watched her go, his heart heavy yet strangely lifted. He had given her a song, but she had given him something greater, the reminder of why he sang at all. Backstage, members of his entourage were stunned. They had seen Elvis charm, laugh, even tease an audience, but never break, never weep openly. Some worried it made him look vulnerable, but others knew the truth. It had made him immortal in a different way. That night spread like wildfire. Fans retold the story to anyone who would listen. How Elvis had stopped the show, pulled a girl on stage, and cried with her. Newspapers picked it up, calling it the night the king showed his heart. For years afterward, people who had been there spoke of it like a defining memory in their lives. Couples who had been in the audience told their children. Friends repeated the details so vividly, it was as if they could still see the rhinestones, glistening with tears. The legend of the king grew, not from perfection, but from humanity. As for Elvis, the moment never left him. In interviews, he hinted at it without ever naming the girl. He would say things like, "Sometimes the fans give me more than I give them," and those who knew exactly what he meant. The girl's identity faded into mystery. Some claimed she was from Memphis. Others swore she was from out of state. Her name was never confirmed, and perhaps that was for the best. She became less a person and more a symbol, a reminder that even the brightest star could be humbled by love, by memory, by loss. Elvis continued to perform, continued to shine, but something in him had changed. Each time he sang "Love Me Tender" or "Bridge Over Troubled Water," his voice carried a new depth, as though he was always singing a little for her, and a little for her father too. And the fans remembered. Always, because legends are not built from perfect shows or flawless performances. They are built from nights like this, when the king of rock and roll stood on stage, pulled a little girl from the crowd, and for just a moment, became one of us. Elvis didn't just perform that night, he connected, heart to heart, with thousands of strangers through one little girl's story. And in doing so, he reminded the world that music is not about perfection, but about love, memory, and the courage to feel. If this story moved you, share it, because some moments are too powerful to be forgotten.